Financial disclaimer. While we're excited to share all we know about crypto, please remember that we are not providing professional or financial advice. Cryptocurrency and other digital assets values can be volatile and fluctuate frequently. You are solely responsible for evaluating all merits and risks associated with financial decisions, and you should seek the advice of a registered financial advisor or tax professional when in doubt. If you've been considering making your first investment in cryptocurrency or digital assets, or are looking for a convenient way to make crypto purchases with a more personal touch, we encourage you to reach out to Coinflip Preferred, our white glove order desk service. Our expert team of crypto client managers will guide you through every step of the process and help you determine what's best for your portfolio. Reach out to us on the phone at 877-339-6432 or via email at orderdesk@coinflip.tech. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to Flip the Coin, Crypto Conversations, the official Coinflip webcast. My name is Slade Kellogg. I'm head of Coinflip's Digital Asset Advisory Services. The purpose of this series of webcasts is simple. We keep investors informed about news, narratives, technicals, fundamentals, and insights into the unique universe of digital assets investing. Since this is our first episode, I'll give you a quick briefer on who Coinflip is and why we decided to produce this show. Coinflip was founded in 2015 as a Bitcoin ATM company. We started off with just a handful of crypto ATMs. With some seriously long hours and the passion of our founders, Coinflip became the largest Bitcoin ATM network in the United States by volume, and we began launching other crypto products thereafter. The most recent of those products is Coinflip Preferred, a white glove service that enables our customers to speak to a real live expert to conveniently purchase large volumes of crypto directly into their custody. We'll talk more about Coinflip Preferred later, but first, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Let's start out with our special guest, Adam Blumberg. He's a certified financial planner. He's co-founder of Interaxis, one of the preeminent industry players in educating financial advisors in the world of digital assets. Adam, would you like to give us a brief introduction and tell us more about the great work you guys are doing over at Interaxis?
Sure, Slade. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you all having me on here. So a little bit of my background, I was a financial advisor for over 12 years, had my own practice with a partner, and in 2017, 2018, went down that proverbial crypto rabbit hole that those of us, once you start learning a little bit about it, you can't stop and can't stop and can't stop. And it reminded me so much of the early days of the internet, which is why I kept going down that rabbit hole, because I vividly remember the early days and growth of the internet, and this seemed like something very similar. So in 2019, my partner Ron and I decided to start a YouTube channel just to explain crypto, not to try to get anyone to buy it, but just explain how it works, how to look at it, especially from the perspective of a financial advisor. And in 2020, we said, you know what, we need courses to actually teach crypto to financial advisors that were not done by the crypto natives or the crypto bros, or you have to get in this, or have fun staying poor crowd, but more of the here's how to look at it, here's how to understand the technology, but then here's how to go a little bit deeper and understand why it affects your practice, how it's going to affect your clients, all those kinds of things. So since 2020, we've been creating education content and helping financial advisors understand Bitcoin, crypto, how to fit it all into a portfolio, how to make it a part of their practice, how to talk to clients about it. So, that's where we are. Today, Interaxis has taught thousands of financial advisors about why Bitcoin exists, why crypto exists, and where we might be going with it in the future.
Very cool. And as a financial advisor, I have to say we very much appreciate your help in helping us, learn the space, merge it into, the traditional practice of financial advice. So it's been a big win on the part of our community. So thanks a lot. Pleasure to have you today, Adam. Also, we have Francis Roth, who's one of my colleagues. And Francis, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do here at Coinflip?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, again, Adam, thank you for being here. Speaking on behalf of Coinflip, I think a lot of our management have benefited from Interaxis' introductory education for crypto. I think it's kind of become standard practice, kind of a rite of passage at Coinflip to take that initial course. So appreciate you being on today. As for myself, I am Coinflip's education and community engagement manager. I stumbled across Bitcoin in 2013, which triggered decade of obsessive study. Immediately, that switch kind of flipped, having been alive in that transitory period of no internet to internet. So started studying the history of money, banking, present historical macro conditions, geopolitics, commodities and equity markets, and obviously Bitcoin itself. So I've been educating people about Bitcoin for better part of the last decade, mostly pro bono, and now being able to do it in a professional capacity, especially alongside you two gentlemen, is a tremendous privilege. So very excited to be able to share what I know with both our clients and a broader audience.
Great. Thanks, Francis. And I guess a little bit about myself. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the head of Coinflip's digital asset advisory services. Once again, Slade Kellogg here. I've been in the financial services industry for, 25 years now, mostly focused on the TradFi investment, wealth management sides of the business. Like Adam, I'm also a certified financial planner and used to work directly with clients many moons ago. I'm also a chartered financial analyst, but I've spent most of my career building investment products like ETFs and robo-advisors and investment advisory services rather than managing portfolios of investments. But real pleasure to be here today. And so, Francis, I guess you got the short straw. You're going to moderate today's conversation. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, now that we've gotten all the pleasantries out of the way, we can kind of get into the meat of today's discussion, which I know we're all excited about, which is tokenized assets and sort of tokenization as an abstraction. So I'm going to give kind of a quick overview of the topic, and then the three of us are going to have a more free-form discussion about it. So first order of business for anybody listening, what is tokenization and why are we talking about it? Conceptually, it's very simple. We're basically tokenization is the process of issuing a digital representation of a real world asset on a blockchain. And if that sounded like total word salad, here's a concrete example. So imagine that you own a real asset, a commodity, or for instance, a home. As the owner of this valuable, unique real world asset, you have a very strong incentive to assert a claim of ownership over that asset, some sort of documentation that sort of proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that that thing belongs to you. In this case, it would be the title to your home. Property ownership, obviously a very foundational concept in our legal system, at least here in the US. But the methods that we use to track property rights are pretty clunky. We have this mix of paper and electronic records that require lots of third parties to manage, which makes them very annoying, very time consuming to transfer in the event that we want to sell them or trade them or bequeath them to our inheritors. Typically that involves, in the case of real estate, title companies and realtors and lawyers and courts, all of which obviously incur lots of time and paperwork and costs and fees. So now let's imagine an alternate universe where the title to your home has been tokenized, that is to say, digitized and put on this immutable public record that we call a blockchain. If you want to sell your home, rather than having to pay a bunch of different parties and fill out tons of paperwork and jump through all kinds of hoops, you can just transfer the token that represents ownership of your home to the new owner once they've posted funds at effectively zero cost. And that entire transaction could theoretically take place in minutes and between two private parties with no intermediaries required. Obviously, there's some legal exceptions to that, and a lot of that is still being worked out, but that's kind of tokenization in a nutshell. It's the digitization of property rights. So real estate, again, is just one application. We're going to be talking about a lot more. But right now, I'm going to pass things off to you guys. You feel like I missed anything important in that explanation, or does that about cover it?
I'll jump in here. I think that covers some of it, Francis, and obviously talking about the idea of tokenizing my house, my home is, makes it a little more concrete for people, I think. I will caution to say, one, that when we start talking about tokenized assets, real world assets, tokenization, securitization of tokens, whatever we want to call it, because it goes by thousands of different names here.
Sure.
We tend to get naysayers that are going, okay, if I tokenize my house, is it now available for trading? Is it, am I going to use that for degen activity? Am I going to borrow against my home and go,
Yeah.
buy a bunch of meme tokens or something like that? And that's not at all what we're talking about. Two, when we're talking about things like tokenizing, title to my house, we have to realize that so much of that, especially when we start talking about, something like homes, is going to be at the mercy of governments, right? It's going to be at the mercy of state and county governments that keep those records. And we're not going to be able to tokenize assets like that until those government entities are on board. And who knows when that's going to be, but it is a more concrete example of tokenization of assets. I liken it to, very often, or I talk about the tokenization of something like private funds, right? So if I wanted to invest in a private real estate fund, and of course I talk about this, Slade, you can think about this too from the perspective of the financial planner or the financial advisor. One, clients that want to invest or investors that want to invest in something like private funds right now, that to me is where kind of the beginning of tokenization will be. Because if you've ever wanted to invest in some sort of, real estate fund, be it a private REIT or some sort of private company or hedge fund or private equity or something like that, one of the huge barriers to entry is the lack of liquidity. The fact that you really, you put your money in and then you kind of really don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You just hope that the people managing that company are able to do a really good job of managing the company such that you get some sort of income stream at some point, and then hopefully at some point it grows in value to the point that they are able to sell it for more than you paid or for more than you put in. But until then, there's very little liquidity and there's very little ability for you to really see what's going on. So where tokenization comes in is they say, okay, Francis, instead of you putting $100,000 in and you get a stack of paperwork basically that you put in a filing cabinet and hopefully you scan it and probably put it in some sort of Google Drive somewhere to be forgotten about for a while. You put your money in and then you're kind of like, okay, I hope this goes well. Right. And obviously those investors are doing it because they want something that is that is not necessarily correlated with the rest of the market, something that's going to produce income regularly. But as we saw in 2008, especially, you're really subject to what happens in the rest of the world and what happens to the macroeconomy and the microeconomy and all that. So, but before you can get any sort of liquidation or any sort of increase in value of what you hold, and even then you can't capitalize on the increase in value of what you hold until such time as the managers of that company decide they're going to liquidate and sell. So what we have is we take that stack of paperwork now that you have that you can't do anything with, and we digitize it and put it in a token that is stored on a public database, which is what a blockchain is, right? It's a publicly visible database, which means that you as the investor, Francis, are not subject to whatever that management company is making sure that they keep track of what you have and making sure that they keep track of how to pay you your distributions or your dividends. And so you're left with maybe investing in the same asset. It doesn't really help the asset all that much. But what it does from you as the investor perspective is it potentially provides greater liquidity, because the fact that we have that token now means that that management company doesn't have to worry about thinking about who owns that
Right.
particular piece of their fund or their particular real estate investment or something. They know that Francis put in $100,000, and if it's tokenized and Francis has 100,000 tokens, and they're going to pay the distribution to the holder of the tokens, no matter where that is. And
Right.
if Francis decides to sell half of his tokens to Slade, the management company doesn't have to go through a valuation. They don't have to go through repapering. They don't have to make sure that Slade is an accredited investor. All that is done kind of on the back end. And you, Francis, can sell, half of your tokens if you want to Slade. And the management company is still just paying the wallet. It's paying the digital wallet that holds the tokens. So the management company can go about doing what they do. The reason why the reason why private investments like that are so illiquid is because we don't want to, because the management company or the founder, the fund company, whatever it is, doesn't want to take their time every time you want to sell to go value the company and repaper and decide where they're going to send their distributions and make sure that that person is credited. They don't want to have to do that. And quite frankly, if I'm an investor, I don't want them to take time doing that. That's not their job. Their job is to go do the best thing with the real estate. Right. So if we can take all that off their hands and add potential liquidity and add transparency, because Slade now, when he's deciding if he wants to buy those 50,000 tokens from you, he can look at the income paying history on it. And he can look at maybe the underlying value of the assets there and decide what it's worth for him. And then there can be a transaction there, a financial transaction, such that he now has half of your original investment. You get to liquidate some of it. You both now can start receiving the income from it. And the management company doesn't care. It doesn't matter to them because they haven't had to have any part of that, but it can still be completely legal and compliant. So to me, that's the kind of the, if there is a lowest hanging fruit for tokenization of assets, that to me is one of them, of these private companies where in my past as a financial advisor, many of my clients didn't want to invest, and the illiquidity and the lack of transparency were the two biggest factors. It's I put my money in and then I'm just kind of hoping that they know what they're doing, and I cannot get my money back out until such time as they completely liquidate the fund. And at that point, it might be that maybe I've had to do something and sell it. And if you try to sell one of these private funds, your only option, as per the contract that you likely signed when you got into it, your only option is to sell back to the management company at probably 90 cents on the dollar, right? Which is not a very good investment for you.
Not ideal, yeah.
So
in addition to whatever taxes you're getting hit with.
Exactly. So that's kind of where I talk about tokenization of assets, tokenization of funds like that. And from there, you can see where it goes to tokenization of public funds, tokenization of equities, because you now have a system that is more efficient, where individual companies don't have to keep everything stored in their own database. They can just utilize the public database, which we call a blockchain or a decentralized ledger. They can utilize wallet technology, which is how we custody those assets, custody those tokens, to be able to pay the distributions. They can basically piggyback on all these greater efficiencies so that they can do a better job of managing funds. So that's my, I guess, quick thought on tokenization. That wasn't that quick. I apologize. It wasn't as quick as I would have liked for it to be.
Ramble all you want. That's what we're here for. We can cut it down. We'll fix it in post.
I agree with everything you said, and you just went through a bunch of awesome use cases, and I think the underlying kind of foundation for the low-hanging fruit, as you put it, is any kind of investment that is extremely paperwork intensive, doesn't have a centralized or even decentralized, in this case, a decentralized, ledger, right? There's lots of intermediaries required, long lockup periods in the case of private placements or private investments, whether they be asset-backed or venture capital pools or what have you. So even for the accredited investor class, they're having to lock up their funds for many, many years before they can realize any kind of distribution, right? So this gives that asset class the ability to basically get a secondary market, right? To get liquidity, allow private investors to liquidate their investments at a much faster pace, given there's a healthy secondary market that can be created in an ATS or another platform for the exchange of those tokens. So yeah, that, and of course, there's a lot of, I wouldn't call them frozen, but inaccessible assets on the books for companies. And sometimes they're, and this is the future, but it's a little esoteric. It might be something like IP, intellectual property. It could be I've seen use cases where companies have tax credits and such that they just can't even leverage some of these assets in their books because there's no market, there's no way to transmit it. So, the tokenization opens up this entire new world. I mean, we talk about real estate quite a bit because it's kind of the easiest one to understand, to liquidate all or a portion of the ownership in a real asset like real estate, and then distribute that, and even distribute revenue sharing and such. But there's there's so many opportunities for unlocking liquidity and unfreezing assets that we could never even think about, like partial ownership in artwork that was inaccessible to most investors outside of the very affluent. So there's a little theme of democratization of the investment world too through tokenization.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really important, Slade, is the unlocking, right? Because one, what we're seeing is more people want to have investments in alternative asset classes. And you mentioned one, you mentioned art, which has kind of become very popular. There's also, royalties, income streams. I'm from Texas originally, so there's a lot of, oil and gas royalties and such. Slade, I know you're in Texas as well, so you learn all about that by osmosis when you're in Texas. And so there's other investments people are going to want to have. The illiquidity has been a problem, and the ability to not have it as part of your kind of financial plan, I guess, not have it as an option there. So, an example that I think I gave the other day on social media, whatever it was, is luxury items, luxury goods. And there's that among younger investors, there's this idea or thought recently of investing in things like luxury watches, luxury handbags. Of course, sneakers are really hot right now. Then there's as you mentioned, the investment in artwork. One, they're pretty illiquid, but imagine if, I talk about financial advisors, but imagine if it's your portfolio and you have a, $150,000 Rolex watch or $150,000 watch, not as part of your portfolio, but something you've invested in, and you're not buying it necessarily because you want to wear it around, because quite honestly, I wouldn't wear a $150,000 watch anywhere. So I would, keep it locked up, keep it in storage or something. But if I'm trying to think about where I need to get cash, and I don't mean need to, like I need cash in order to pay my last bill, but let's say I had, I want to buy a car, or I got my daughter's wedding coming up, or college payments or something like that. I want to, the way I can be most efficient in my financial planning is to look at all the assets I have and figure out where the most efficient source of capital is. And sometimes in more traditional planning, the source of capital is I sell some assets in order to pay, big amounts like that, or I've saved up a bunch of cash, which of course means I haven't invested that in anything. But what if I could look across my assets, like private real estate I might have invested in, and or luxury items, and or artwork, or something like that, and go, is there a way to unlock cash, unlock liquidity from those? And it might not be selling them. It might be, can I use them as collateral for a loan? And again, I'm not talking about a degen loan where I'm trying to go get a loan against my Rolex so that I can buy pictures of monkeys. But can I get a loan against my Rolex such that I can pay for my daughter's wedding or pay for this college payment, because maybe the market has gone down, the stock market has come down, and I'm not ready to go sell stocks at a loss, but I need cash to pay tuition for my kid this month. So I might go get a loan against my Rolex, and I can do that in kind of this decentralized ecosystem where I have tokenized the ownership of that particular watch. And that is something that we've kind of seen happening, of course, with the rise of NFTs a few years ago, is this idea of creating non-fungible tokens that represent a real asset, again, like a watch or a handbag or something, not necessarily such that I can get a loan against it, but such that I can custody that asset somewhere like a safe, maybe a jeweler that has a safe, and then I can show that I have that asset on my books. Again, you mentioned, Slade, the unlocking. It's the unlocking of other assets that I own, and seeing those as part of my overall wealth and investment portfolio, such that I can actually utilize them, not necessarily because I want to utilize them again for degen activity or gambling or trying to invest in the market or something. But this is, I live my life by paying for things with dollars. I don't want to necessarily have to sell assets to pay for things with dollars. How else can I have access to the value that I've built up in those assets? And this is how you can have access. The one way that you usually have access to something like that is like a home equity loan. And you mentioned it earlier, Francis, the tokenizing my home. But right now I can get a home equity loan if I want to, but that's really the only place that I can borrow against appreciated assets or borrow against assets that I've invested in over time is something like a home equity loan. Other than that, it is really difficult to get a loan against any other type of assets that I have. When they start being tokenized, it's not necessarily that everyone's just going to see that and give me a loan, but the ease of transfer, the transparency, all of those things are going to give me those abilities. That it's going to unlock those abilities.
And getting a home equity loan, Adam, is not very still to this day. It's still a paperwork intensive process. Especially if you go with a local bank or credit union. It's just it's a total pain. Hey, Francis, and jump in here if you'd like, but I wanted to get your feedback, Adam, on how you think smart contracts sort of play into this world also, and what sort of interesting investment characteristics might be, at the forefront or innovated with the advent of smart contracts, alongside tokenized assets. What additional benefits you think are going to be brought to the forefront?
Francis, I'll let you go first because I tend to be long-winded.
Yeah, that's totally fine. My initial thought, sort of unrelated to NFTs, but something like the automatic enforcement of a legal contract, whether that's something like a rental agreement, whether that's something like a transfer of title for a home or a security or something like that. Anything, I think kind of the major theme of this conversation has been major increases in transactional velocity and in liquidity. And I think that that's another sort of step improvement towards both of those things by sort of removing law as a mitigating factor. Because if you're talking about, let's say that I'm a renter, right? I have a rental agreement with an apartment. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong there. It's sort of, in many ways, even though it's a paper contract, in many states and jurisdictions, there are ways that I can, let's say, squat in that apartment. I can, refuse to pay rent. And there are like many steps that a landlord has to take in order to evict me. There's all sorts of like difficulties that can pop up. But when you have, and again, obviously this is predicated on our existing legal system. And so the interoperability of the existing legal system and this new sort of brave new world of smart contracts and tokenized assets, it's going to take a long time for the dust to settle there. But down the road, I see that as something where if I don't pay rent, I have an electronic lock on my door and it just doesn't open anymore. Something like that. When I first sort of started investigating smart contracts, that was sort of the first big use case that popped up in my mind, not just for landlords, but any kind of legal agreement where auto enforcement, basically trustless enforcement of contracts, immediately forces both parties to behave in a way that is beneficial to the other, sort of removing the possibility of entering into a contract with bad faith by making it literally, in some cases, impossible to violate that contract without there being a severe negative consequence for the violator. That's sort of where my head's at with smart contracts. Obviously, there's infinite utility, and we're sort of just beginning to scratch the surface there. But yeah, Adam, I'll let you take over from here.
Yeah. It's really important to note that when we talk about tokenization, any token that represents an asset, whether that's a fund or a private real estate deal or my house or my car or the piece of artwork that's behind me or anything else, that is a smart contract. That token is actually a smart contract, which means that we can write it. When I say we, like I'm a programmer, right? But someone can write that the way they need to write it such that it is not creating a crypto asset like Bitcoin or ETH or something that is volatile like that. It is creating a digital representation of the ownership or a digital representation of that asset. Right. So we can write things into that smart contract that say, if when Francis invests his $100,000 in his real estate token, he is not allowed to trade that token for 1 year. He is not allowed to trade it to someone who has not passed KYC AML and is an accredited investor via this ATF, via this alternative trading system. So we can write that into those smart contracts such that not only can they kind of replicate what actually happens in the traditional finance world right now, but actually adds layers of safety, security, adds layers of legalese to it. So when you have the kind of natural kind of naysayers around tokenization that say you're creating these crypto assets or people are just going to trade them or whatever, and that's going to cause some instability. Well, What I'm saying is we're going to use the smart contracts to actually create more stability and to actually, as you said, Francis, enforce those legal contracts in a way that there is no way to violate them. There will be no way for me to transfer those tokens from me to Slade until it has been 12 months. And unless Slade has gone through the KYC, AML, and accreditation process. So that's one part that I think smart contracts are playing in this is those that are looking to tokenize assets. It is not like, I mean, right now, the three of us could go mint a token if we wanted to. It doesn't necessarily represent anything. But if we wanted to create a token that someone was actually going to invest in and it was going to represent a real asset, we could create it the way we need to, such that people will be willing to invest in it. And it could even be such that they don't even realize it's being tokenized. It's just a way for us to track it better. Right. And I think a lot of tokenization will start that way, the likes of BlackRock and others. I mean, JP Morgan already tokenizes their JPM coin, which, by the way, is a real world asset, right? It's a token that represents a dollar. They've already tokenized dollars internally just for efficiency standpoint. And they'll eventually, kind of launch that on the world when they figure out how to make money at it. But that's, that's one place I think that smart contracts are playing is we can write these tokens the way we need to fit the current compliance and regulation and everything, such that it's not like we're trying to circumvent, we're trying to actually enhance the current compliance and regulation, but do so in a more efficient way. And that's a lot of what smart contracts do.
It's great. So the stuff that was very manually intensive, via the record keeper or transfer agent, to place restrictions. It looks like, for the issuer of the security, the private security, that there's tons and tons of benefits there. You mentioned, Adam, holding period, lockup periods, restrictions on, when you can sell, restrictions on the type of investor that is this security might be appropriate for or the allowable for. Any thoughts on some novel, innovative ability to add things like, I don't know, revenue sharing, something akin to a dividend, or just create more interesting investing benefits to the holder of those tokens?
Oh, there definitely is. I'm pretty excited about things like we mentioned art already, but I think music royalties are going to be a big one. I think the ability to buy into the royalties from whoever my favorite artist is, that I can participate in the royalties that they receive from streaming services or what have you. There are already people launching projects like that, and it's not necessarily slated in the realm of like I'm not necessarily going to invest in royalties from a Taylor Swift song because I need to.
You read my mind. You read my mind.
Because honestly, look, she doesn't need it. Like she doesn't need my investment. But look, let's say that I have some favorite new artists that very few people have heard of, that's cultivated a community online, and I love their music, and they are they start going, look, you can invest in this song or this album or whatever it is, and you get a piece of whatever my royalties are. And by the way, we can make it very transparent. We can utilize smart contracts such that you can get part of the revenue stream. You hold it in your digital wallet and such. That person, that band, that artist gets some money up front to be able to promote themselves, to be able to get into the likes of Spotify and Pandora and iTunes and all the other streaming services. And I get to participate in the royalties partially because I like the band, partially because I've been a part of it. Or there's probably going to be some specialty within investments that says I'm going to specialize in music royalty investments. I'm going to analyze what type of music gets the most plays, and therefore I'm going to help my clients understand what they should invest in terms of new music coming up, what sorts of tokens, and it's going to be tokens that represent those income streams. And once, of course, I have that income stream coming in and I can prove it and it's verifiable and with the transparency, then that token is now an asset that I have. And if it's streaming in and has a value, maybe of like an 18% rate of return, someone like Francis comes in and goes, man, I'd like to have an 18% rate of return. I'll buy it from you, Adam. I'm like, that's great. I paid 50 grand for it. It's now, worth significantly more. I'm happy to sell it to you. I did a good job of investing. Or the investment manager that specialized in this did a really good job of understanding what's going to be a really good investment in the, music royalty business. And that's just, a piece of the idea of tokenizing income streams, right? I mean, we talk about dividend streams or distribution streams from real estate. It could just as easily be music. It could be oil and gas revenues, whatever it might be. I can tokenize my stream of income and then go utilize that as an asset, either as something that I want to keep getting the income stream on, or I sell that income stream, or I promise that income stream as collateral. And I say, look, I'm going to get, $1,000 a month for the next year. I want to borrow $8,000 right now. And going back to our talk of smart contracts, that whole loan can be enforced utilizing a smart contract that says, as the money comes to my wallet, it immediately goes partially to pay back the loan I got. So it seems to get sort of convoluted, and it sounds like I'm talking, science fiction or something like that. But this is like the market's going to drive this. And I'm not here to say this is definitely going to happen this year or next year, but the market is going to go that direction. And what we've seen over and over and over again is when we give people the technology to do things like this, when you give people the technology to have more control and more investments, they're absolutely going to take it.
Well, go for it, Francis. I'm chomping at the bit, but you first, sir.
Yeah, so since I think that like something that we sort of neglected to talk about or mentioned very briefly, talking about art and NFTs. Most people that are familiar with the crypto space and are familiar with tokenization as an abstraction, your introduction to it was probably like the wave of art and NFTs that got super popular in like the 2018, 2021 period. I think that that's my perception. I could be entirely wrong. I think those markets have lost a lot of steam, largely as a result of just a sustained bear market. But I also just think that people have kind of come to understand that like art is not the killer app for NFTs. But I do think that we would be remiss to not at least touch on it as a topic. So what is your guys's, just curious on both of your opinions. Do you think that art NFTs in terms of like monkey JPEGs are going to stick around in the long term? Is that like an assessment that you're really even willing to make? Not financial advice. Or do you think that like all of these other, so the sort of increased velocity, transactional throughput, liquidity is just going to unlock many, many, many other doors for NFTs, and the sort of art thing will have just been kind of a flash in the pan?
Sure, I'll jump in first. I don't think pictures of primates is probably the best use for the technology of non-fungible tokens.
Think carefully before you talk about my big C's.
It's right now, I guess the first kind of use case was collectibles, digital collectibles, and so many problems with collectibles in general as an investment. Primarily, I would say the tax code.
Mm-hmm.
The have the highest potential. I'm not a tax advisor, by the way, but they have the worst tax treatment of any potential investment. So when we're talking to clients, it's way out there. It's one of the last asset classes you're going to look at. It's when you don't have any other money to spend, right? So
when you say collectibles in like pre-NFTs, let's say in the traditional financial sense, you're talking about stuff like baseball cards. Would watches fall into that category, or are they treated as, are luxury goods treated as differently from a tax perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a tax advisor, so I'm thinking more along the lines of baseball cards. I guess in the NFT world, even a tweet from a celebrity would be considered a collectible. But yeah, the tax world is, it's pretty convoluted, and the key is to kind of like, especially in the world we're entering with tokenization, the security tokens, et cetera, is there's no tax law. There's some stuff out, the IRS has put it out for comment. But as usual, we all know this, the regulators are always way behind the technology. And so as a best practice, you want to look through the asset itself and see what it represents. Does it represent equity? Represent, in this case, NFTs, a collectible. And then that's kind of your safe practice for figuring out what are the underlying tax ramifications, right, for the sell. And then swapping, not to kind of get off topic here, Francis, but a lot of people got caught off guard when they were swapping one NFT for another, or swapping. Most NFTs are purchased with crypto, right?
Yeah.
Many cases, in fact, in almost all cases I'm aware of. But That's a taxable event too. I mean, it's not like you're swapping your Bitcoin for the NFT.
Yeah.
The way the tax authorities look at it is you're selling your crypto, you're selling your ETH. You just probably had a tax, implication right there. Then you lost your basis, and you're buying an NFT, and you've reset your basis. And when you sell an NFT, you're going to pay taxes again at the collectible rate. So I just stay away from them as a matter of where they're at today. Where I think there's some really interesting use case for NFTs is something like securing the ownership of your diploma, for example. You get this diploma, from college or high school, or what have you, graduate school, and it's a paper record. And you better hope that the centralized database that you and your school had doesn't get corrupted or something, because if you lose that paper record, then you've lost all, documentation or ownership of that degree that you spent, a couple $100,000 for. So that system is just, there's so many systems like that are antiquated, that are have serious security lapses, where NFTs could very well be part of a solution to the digital ownership of actual physical real world piece of paper or asset, or
right.
A credential or something like that. And then just think about how easy it would be for an employer to ping, the database or resource that can verify the actual authenticity. Yeah, exactly. So that's where all the innovation, I think, is going to exist in the future. Whether that's as fun as monkey GIF, whatever, I don't know, but probably a lot more real world value.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's a great segue into what I want to talk about next. But Adam, I do want kind of your quick take on the NFT art, and kind of like what the future of that might look like, if you think it has a future.
Well, I think some of it has a future, and the places where it has a future. One is the NFT boom, I guess, whatever it was, and I think it was 2021.
Yeah.
Yes, there were a lot of people that lost money. It got kind of crazy. I didn't really understand what was going on. I fortunately didn't trade a whole lot of them. I think I bought a few just to see what it was like and get in the Discord communities and such and see what was going on. One thing it did introduce people to was the idea of verifiable scarcity, which we've been talking about in Bitcoin for a while, but it's very hard to explain when the verifiable scarcity in Bitcoin is all about the fact that, trust us, there's only ever going to be 21 million, and there's already been 19.5 million. And here's where they are, because a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin, and they're all the same. Non-fungible tokens basically gave people a better understanding of verifiable scarcity. And it was like NBA Top Shots, it was, Bored Apes, CryptoPunks, all of those.
Sure.
A lot of people to understand that better. Two, when you start talking about the future of them, I think when we look at what some of those organizations, companies, projects, whatever, are going to do now with the intellectual property, and whether or not owning an NFT, whether it's a Bored Ape or a doodle or a pudgy penguin, is going to give me some ownership of the income stream and of the intellectual property, such that if that particular ape or if that particular penguin is used in a cartoon or an advertisement or something, I get a royalty from it. Then it becomes a viable investment. And let's see, because some of those organizations, of course, Bored Apes and CryptoPunks owned by Yuga Labs, and then Doodles and such, they have people working for them that are working on those kinds of subjects. They are trying to build those communities and build those assets as intellectual property. So what I liken it to for some people is, imagine in like the 30s and 40s being able to buy a piece of Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, or buy a piece of the Avengers or something like that. Every time they're used, you get a piece of that. That's where I think the like non-fungible tokens and some of those what were just digital pictures are going to potentially play out, if those teams can do it that way. That's where it's a viable asset above and beyond a static picture.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and that's also probably a net really good for like independent creators, cartoonists that maybe aren't able to get their shows on networks, as we see kind of network television slowly going the way of the dodo. There probably will be a lot more independent creators on platforms like YouTube, on Gumroad, that will be looking for ways to monetize their content. And maybe, like you said, having that character as an investment vehicle, as something that you can own equity in, where it produces a royalty upon appearance or upon views, or however the individual creator wants to structure it. It's probably not good for the entire sort of creator economy. That's a really interesting point. I don't think that I've heard that before. I do want to get into, so Slade, you briefly touched on the idea of like a tokenized sort of an NFT version of like a diploma, which I think ties very neatly into the idea of tokenized identity verification writ large. So I'll kind of give my quick, 30-second spiel on this. Tokenized identity verification, what I'm talking about essentially is similar again to what Slade said. A diploma is a great example, something that is like uniquely tied to your identity that is not fraudable or fakeable. So think like a tokenized driver's license, right? This is something that can't be reproduced. It's a document that can't be reproduced. That's a one of one thing. And if it's on a blockchain, right, then there's this immutable public ledger that it's posted on. That basically says, this is me, this is my driver's license, and it cannot possibly be reproduced. So I think stuff like this is a double-edged sword. I think that there is a compelling argument to be made that tokenized one-of-one identity verification will probably have substantial upside in terms of stuff like fraud prevention and protection from identity theft. Today, if somebody has access to your social security number, a bit of personal info, your mom's maiden name, etc., they can gain access to your bank account pretty easily, and many other things too, not just bank account information. And scammers and fraudsters, especially in this space and sort of all over the world, are getting more and more sophisticated, developing more methods of extracting identity related information from people by the day. But if you have a tokenized ID, then you're the only person on earth who possesses that token. It can't be duplicated, it can't be faked, which makes that kind of identity theft impossible, short of stealing, maybe the private keys that are associated with the wallet that contains that ID, or the smart contract, or some sort of interference in that capacity, which obviously requires a much greater degree of sophistication than tricking somebody into giving you their SSN. I don't know how much this is on you guys or even most people's radars, but I'm curious what you guys think about the sort of the future implications of tokenized identity verification, if there's much of a future there, if it's something that you're even thinking about, because it's not really directly tied to financialized assets in any way.
Let me jump in real quick. One, because the certification and designation that we started, the Certified Digital Asset Advisor, we created an NFT for it almost from day one. So anyone who is a certified digital asset advisor has the NFT to represent that. And it can be verified. I think digital identity, digital verification, digital credentials that are immutable, that are transparent, that are uncorruptible, that is absolutely going to take hold sooner rather than later, such that when I apply for a job, when I try to, get a client to work with me, anything like that, I can prove that by showing them my credentials and showing that they're valid and up to date. And that company is not going to have to go to another database and ask. They're just going to be able to, plug in my ID or something and know that it's verified. And going even further, Francis, something you mentioned, when I went down the rabbit hole in 2017, 2018, one of the first use cases I heard for public blockchains was the idea of passports or the idea of citizenship, right? That so many people, especially in other countries, that are not born necessarily in a hospital, never get any sort of identity within their country. Therefore, they can never travel. They can never go anywhere. They according to their country, they don't have an identity. They don't exist. And I think the idea of a digital passport that is on a public blockchain or something like that is going to absolutely take hold, because the antiquated idea of literally carrying around a plastic group of paper such that I'm an official citizen and I can travel around is actually kind of silly in the digital age when we think about it. The anxiety that goes with, have I updated my passport? Did I remember to bring it to the airport? Once I'm in the other country, do I make sure that I'm not losing it? This is the most important document I have when I'm traveling outside of the US, because it allows me to get back. Why is it a bunch of plastic and paper? Why is it not digital? And I think we're going to go that direction as well. So I think digital identity credentials are going to be hugely important. And if we step a little bit further in that, people that are looking to invest in just cryptocurrency, people that are looking to invest in Bitcoin or ETH or one of those others, if those digital passports or if those digital credentials are built on top of Ethereum or built on top of Solana or built on top of Avalanche or something, that means more transactions, theoretically higher value of those tokens, because if every time I scan my passport because I'm traveling, that is a transaction on the Ethereum blockchain, that should lead to higher value of ETH, right? Because there's more demand for the token that makes the transactions go. So
Sure.
there's more to think about than just, is there going to be digital identity or digital credentials? It's what does that mean to the overall ecosystem? And
Right.
how does that later inform maybe the price of crypto assets?
That makes me think of something, Slade. While you're, I'm going to sort of type out an additional question while you give your answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a balancing act. There's trade-offs for the benefits and the drawbacks. And you mentioned, Francis, potential for abusive surveillance, the three-letter agencies, maybe keeping tabs on, utilizing such a resource to keep tabs on you. I mean, I hate to blow anyone's bubble up here, but that's already happening. So not really sure if this new technology is going to allow them to be more effective at that. I think the benefits that Adam has laid out are, I think I've had nightmares of like losing my passport, when I was in a foreign country, like, wake up in a cold sweat and you're like, how am I going to get home? So you have to, really, I think the benefits are pretty compelling, and something that can't be destroyed in a fire, or there's all the physical world perils that could interrupt your life, just aren't present when you've got this identification, for example, in this discussion, is stored on a decentralized blockchain. So I'm probably on the pro side of the benefits, Francis, in that long, convoluted answer there.
Yeah, I'm, it's one of those things that I'm sort of like hesitant to advocate for, but it does sort of it to both of your points. There's so many convenience and just like it just makes a lot of sense in a digital age that we're not using physical documents anymore, especially identification documents. There's already such a high degree of surveillance that it's unlikely to make a tremendous difference, at least in the near term. Anyway, I want to talk about sort of the future of tokenized securities and commodities, and then also, Adam, you're I think a little bit more in the weeds on this than either Slade or I. In the long term, which protocols, which blockchains are going to be the winners in the tokenized asset space? Because obviously, something that we haven't really touched on, we haven't gotten really into the nuts and bolts of the technicals on, is that there is no single blockchain that's sort of the de facto home of all tokenized assets. There's lots of assets that are housed on Ethereum. There's lots of assets that are housed on Solana. And now with the advent of Taproot Assets Protocol, there's going to be a lot of assets that are held on Bitcoin. So my quick kind of intro to this is, a few weeks ago, Jamie Dimon made an appearance on Squawk Box. For those of you who know, Jamie Dimon is the CEO of Chase. And obviously he's very, very vocally anti-Bitcoin, and stuff like Bitcoin is antithetical to banking as a practice. So it makes sense for him to be opposed to it. But he came on and talked, he talks very frequently about tokenized assets and blockchain as a fundamentally transformative technology in general. And so if, the head of JP Morgan Chase is saying that tokenized assets are sort of the future of finance, you can sort of bet on them having already developed some of the tools to implement and incorporate it as a product or service that they're going to be offering very soon. So my broader question here is, again, what are, Adam, from your perspective, what are sort of the future winners? Do you think that a lot of the companies that are going to be involved in the tokenized asset space, are they going to be producing their own blockchains in-house? Are they going to be using existing protocols like Ethereum? Obviously, none of us have a crystal ball, but you being sort of a little bit closer to and having eyes on this, I'm curious about your perspective.
I think if we look farther in the future, we're going to have this multi-chain environment, right? So you have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Tezos has been one. So all of these different chains that exist for different purposes. Some of them is speed and cheap. Some of them is to be the ultimate settle layer. Some are there to be the ultimate in decentralization, and they're all kind of vying for that tokenized asset world. And regardless of whether or not they want to admit that, that's where trillions of dollars are. Trillions of
yeah.
dollars can come in via some sort of tokenized assets. And so they're all kind of vying for that. And so eventually what I think we see is anyone who's developing some sort of a token to represent a fund or an asset or something is going to develop on whichever chain makes the most sense for what they're trying to build. Right. And if their tokenized asset needs to transact quickly and cheaply, they're going to build on something like Solana. If we're more concerned about the settlement, it might be Bitcoin or ETH. If we're more concerned about having access to more decentralized finance application, it might be Ethereum, because there's a world of decentralized finance applications. So overall, I think they're going to build on whatever chain, whatever smart contracts make sense for them, and whatever chain makes sense for them. And then you and I are going to be able, it's going to be interconnected, and we're not going to care. Much like
Right.
I don't care what database my information is stored on right now, whether it's an Oracle database or a Microsoft or a SQL or whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't care. As long as it all
Right.
works together, I can go onto a website and utilize that website regardless of where I am. It doesn't matter to me what it's stored on. It's going to be, I think, kind of the same thing. In the nearer term, I feel like most of those companies, if they develop for a public chain, are going to develop for Ethereum, mainly because they're the most developers. It is, as decentralized, I think, as you can get when you're not Bitcoin. And, that's my opinion. Some people will argue with me with that, but it's more decentralized than probably any other, layer one blockchain, and less than Bitcoin. So it's right there. It has the most decentralized finance applications. It has the most users.
Sure.
It has the most money locked in. All of those things. I think it's going
Sure.
to likely go more towards Ethereum for the near term. Now, some like JP Morgan will probably try to develop their own proprietary chains, which to me is not a blockchain. That's just an internal database. So I think part of it is going to be like, we're going to take it wherever the market takes it. And from hearing, you mentioned Jamie Dimon, I'll talk about Larry Fink, president and CEO of BlackRock, who's talked about tokenization. And from everything I've heard, they're going to build on top of Ethereum. Visa is processing USDC, US dollar coin, which, by the way, is a real world asset token, on top of Solana. So it's all going to be based on what the needs are, what the goals are, and what the benefits are of that particular chain. For the nearer term, the 5-year term, if I were going to bet, and again, I'm not giving financial advice either, I would say more of it gets built on top of Ethereum, because there are the most users, there are the most applications, the most developers, and it's been around a really long time and hasn't had a lot of safety security issues.
Okay, yeah, seems like a pretty sensible conclusion to draw. I've got one kind of the question that I wanted to bring up in the interest of tempering excitement and thinking things out to their conclusion and sort of being responsible adults. What happens? I guess, what are the longevity concerns, right? What happens if, let's say, Ethereum's not the big winner and that blockchain kind of deprecates or has another hard fork or expires in some capacity? What happens in the event that, the tokenized assets that are stored on that blockchain? How do you see that sort of situation resolving itself? Is that something that you've given a lot of thought to?
I guess I can take a stab at it, Adam, and lean on you for additional thoughts. I don't think there's going to be, Adam mentioned earlier this idea of multi-chain use cases, or optimization probably is kind of how I frame it out. I really do think, and I believe that there will be bespoke people that will specialize, or chains that will specialize on, either the need or perhaps the asset type. I don't really have, there's always going to be developers, applications, blockchains, and maybe even asset types that are going to be invented in them. We find out that we don't really want them, and they just kind of go by the wayside. So this is creative destruction happens, and I don't think it's something to be feared. And especially if we start moving more towards a security token type world where there's regulations, that will be applied to unwinds and, stuff that kind of goes out of business, let's say, right? There's some sort of way to resolve that issue. So it's not a big fear on my plate right now, Francis. But, black swans happen. You never know. be the first time if some new innovative financial instrument just went poof. I don't want to mention FTX, but so it happens, right?
It does happen.
Adam, what do you think? Any thoughts there?
Look, I haven't given that too much thought. Well, the thought I've given it is when I'm teaching courses and talking about this, people say, well, what if quantum computing? What if this and what if that? And my response oftentimes is look, this is part of the evolution of technology. This is not a revolution. This is just an evolution. This is just the next stage of internet technology and the opportunities it's giving us. And I have quite a bit of faith and trust in that level of evolution. The fact that we are going to continue to build the systems that make it safer, more secure. The likes of BlackRock and JP Morgan are not going to let trillions of dollars of assets literally evaporate overnight because they didn't do their homework and because they didn't devote a lot of time and effort and money into building the right systems. And just because we see negative headlines about hacks and exploits and all that doesn't mean that that's going to be the norm. As more people adopt, it's going to get safer because it has to, because we're not going to get to that level of adoption and efficiency without more safety and more security and more thought about the future of these networks. So they're not jumping into this as like a FOMO or YOLO or anything like that. Whether it's huge companies like that or even smaller companies that are offering tokenized versions of assets, I have, again, some bit of faith and trust, not in the individual people or companies, but in the market overall to build the systems that get us there and to keep them up and running and moving when there are trillions, hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars of assets there. And that's all I can say. Coming up from the early days of, understanding the early days of the internet and how we got to where we are today, I know that the early days of the internet were not safe and secure. It was very slow. It was painful to log on to the internet and do anything. And then it became remarkably easy. And I have an incredibly powerful supercomputer sitting in my pocket right now that I can do just about anything on. And that wasn't thought of early on, but there were plenty of people who were going, oh, does the internet mean the end of retail overall? Is this going to crush real estate? But look, we're going to figure out how this all works. It's not like we're going to flip a switch one day. Pardon, guys, I know this is flip the coin. We're not going to flip the switch one day and everything in the traditional finance world is going to go on chain and we're going to go, oh crap, if I lose my keys, I've lost trillions of dollars. That's not going to happen.
Right.
We're going to ease our way into it. It's going to be safe and secure. The likes of BlackRock and Fidelity and JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank and Citi and all those, as they start to tokenize, they're going to ensure that it's safe and secure and the networks keep moving and they have fail safes in place because they're not moving trillions of dollars of assets on chain willy-nilly. They're putting a lot of money and time and effort and research behind this. They don't have 3 people on a team working on it. They, who are all anonymous or something like that. They have real people earning real money, doing a lot of research, and they're not about to jeopardize their business because of the technology.
That is a suspiciously excellent and coherent answer to something you haven't given very much thought to.
Well said. Well said.
That is, very, very, very good and a very optimistic way to answer that question. And I think I agree with just about everything that you said. That makes perfect sense. In the interest of ending things on an optimistic note, I kind of want to just do a quick around the table of any particular projects or companies or organizations, or even just unexplored use cases of tokenized assets that each one of us are excited about. Adam, if you want to go first, please take lead.
I don't know if there are any particular projects. I mean, look, I like things. I like kind of on-chain lending, and we can call that tokenized assets. I like on-chain lending ideas where we're taking pools of money and helping to lend that out to others that need it. And I don't mean need it like they're down to their last dime and they need to borrow it. I mean, they need it because they're going to, borrow the money and do something better, more efficient with it. So I like the, Maple Finance is one of my favorites. Huma Finance is one that I really like because they're tokenizing income streams. I really like that. There are several companies, projects that are working on, as I said, tokenized music royalties. I think those are going to be the kind of projects that are going to progress some of these innovative new types of investments out there. And of course, those that are building the ability to tokenize funds on Ethereum and Avalanche and Tezos and stuff. I applaud all those. I think they're all moving forward greatly. The likes of Vertalo and Securitize and such that are trying to help companies understand what tokenization means. It doesn't mean we're venturing into volatile crypto assets. It doesn't mean like it's this novel new investment for people. It's how can you invest the same way you've been investing, but give you potentially a few more benefits and make it more efficient for us, the fund issuer. So those are kind of some of the ones I like. I guess if you're looking at projects, I like Maple, I like Huma Finance, I like oh man, I'm drawing a blank right now. I apologize, but those are my favorites. One, because it's kind of institutional lending, but on chain. That's Maple, and Huma is tokenizing income streams, which I think is going to be much more important and valuable than people think.
Very cool. Slade, what are your what are you optimistic about? What are you kind of looking forward to? Are there any projects that you've got your eye on?
Yeah, I don't have any specific projects that I have my eye on right now, but in general, as far as the greatest opportunity for potential disruption that I'm super excited about is disrupting the venture capital world through some of the players that Adam just mentioned, the Securitize, the INXs, the T-Zeros, the Vertalo for transfer agent. We're putting pieces in place that are going to allow companies and maybe even small businesses through regulatory paths like Reg A plus for small business to raise up to $75 million over a rolling 12-month period of time, that they can actually solicit retail participation in, not just accredited investors, but retail participation. So there's a lot of pieces that are starting to be formed or to be put in place. They're not widely used quite yet, and I don't think the markets for these tokenization and the secondary liquidity, or the primary issue or the secondary liquidity, they're out there. The companies and the technology's there. Just the party hasn't started yet, quite yet. And I'm not sure what's holding us back. It's just a go-to-market plan or what it is. But I think the future is going to displace a lot of the old school private backroom VC world. Not only is it going to benefit that same investor set, because as we mentioned earlier in the conversation, the ability not to be locked into your investment for a decade, it's going to benefit them too, the investors.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be pretty cool for the next 5 to 10 years to see just what industries are going to be. The upheaval is just going to be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I think the theme of today's conversation has been this sort of stepwise increase in velocity, right? There's going to be all of this access to liquidity that people previously didn't have in all sorts of liquid asset classes. That's really what this is sort of enabling and empowering. And if you are a believer in the efficiency of markets, which it seems like you guys are, I think that like increasing the transactional speed, sort of the velocity that liquidity moves to the system and pumps into organizations and individuals that are capable of doing world-changing things. It's definitely an exciting thing to be a part of. You guys have really got my kind of the gears turning in my head about what the future looks like and how this sort of the revolution that is tokenized assets, or as Adam says, the evolution of this financial technology is going to change things in a much deeper way than I think that I'd really anticipated going into this conversation. Adam, thank you again for coming on. It's been an absolute delight. I'm sure we'll ask you to come back. Do either of you guys have any closing remarks before we sign off?
I'll just say, look, it's an honor to be here. I'm glad I got to help a bunch of the Coinflip team actually learn a little bit more about crypto digital assets and maybe a little bit more insight in how to think about them from a real portfolio investment standpoint and where the technology is going to take the financial services industry. Our conversation here is very much about the future of this technology, this evolution of technology, and where it might take the financial services industry in the future, and not necessarily about volatile crypto assets and are you bullish or bearish and should you buy, but it's just understanding that this is an evolution of technology and you better kind of understand it and learn how to use it if you're going to invest or help others invest in the future.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Slade?
Yeah, and I just say, Francis, any of our listeners, viewers today have any questions, give us a ring over at Coinflip Preferred. We have live representatives that can help you with any of your questions, help you get started, and give you the expertise to make the most of your portfolio, help you reach your investment objectives in the digital assets realm. Give us a shout, and I'm sure at the end of this webinar, we'll include the contact information so that you guys can find us.
All right. Once again, it's been a pleasure. I feel like I learned a lot over the course of this conversation. I hope that there's been some sort of reciprocal, at least refinement of ideas for everybody. I'm certainly left with a lot of things to think about, and hopefully the listeners are too. So thanks again. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks a lot, Adam. Thanks, Francis.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. If you learned something new today, or just enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, follow, rate, upvote, or whatever arbitrary form of positive engagement the platform you're listening on offers. It helps us reach, educate, and inform more people about the exciting world of digital assets, accelerating the rate at which these technologies are adopted and understood. Again, if you're ready to take your first steps in investing in cryptocurrencies and digital assets, or are looking for a convenient way to make crypto purchases with a personal touch, reach out to one of our Coinflip preferred client managers at 877-339-6432 or via email at orderdesk@coinflip.tech.